Greetings again, beloved creators. We are continuing our discourse on Earth history. It is a hard one to comprehend for most Earth souls because there are multiple energy streams happening simultaneously, evolution, devolution and constancy at very high levels. Today, we will actually get down to the historical events of your timeline. As we and the channel have mentioned many times previously, time is fluid and not set in stone, as your rational minds would have you believe. Therefore, much of what we chronicle for you is subject to change, although the physical events have akashic imprints and will continue to exist on one of your past timelines. You, as a species, have the capabilities of changing your timelines to better suit your evolution. We will address that subject in greater depth at another time. We are not fond of issuing disclaimers in our communications because we want our words and ideas to stand simply as they are, without embellishment or compromise. However, it might be useful to point out that some of the ideas presented herein will echo what has been brought forth in your mythological and religious teachings, and some of it will likely contradict the writings and teachings you are already familiar with. We are not here to convert anyone to a particular way of thinking or convince you of anything. We ask that you remain open to our viewpoint of creation, perhaps realizing that we have a broader perception than most entities that have visited your world. How's that for a modest disclaimer? There have been 4 major civilizations, and a lot of minor ones on your planet, since the grand experiment began unfolding here. 1. Pangaea, 2. Lemuria, 3. Atlantis, and 4. The present. In addition, there have been 2 major events in your solar system that dramatically impacted the history of your world. A. The destruction of Maldek, and B. The destruction of the surface of Mars. We are simplifying the story considerably because there were numerous other events, some of which we will be going into in detail. These would include what your religious writings call the Luciferian Rebellion, which we refer to as the Orion Invasion, the infusion of the Alpha Draconians, reptilians, the reign of the Syrians, your biblical and pre-biblical times, and the quiet invasion of the Zeta Reticulans, Greys. Keep in mind that these are the only major ET infusions. There were many others, including input from certain Andromedan sectors, various levels and dimensions of Pleiadian groups, Venusians, Arcturians, Antareans, and others from Polaris, Alpha Centauri, and many other regions. Add to this the overseeing of your progress by the councils of Alcyon, the Great White Brotherhood, the Confederations of Light and their offshoots, Ashtar, Solar Cross, etc., and the many interplanetary priesthoods, Melchizedek, Metatron, Enoch, etc., and you have quite a bowl of porridge on the cosmic stove. Well, as you say, let's get on with it. Let's start with Pangaea. But let's put it into the historic timeline. The land of Pan was the pinnacle of success regarding the experimentation and interbreeding of various DNA strains. This was the paradise, or Garden of Eden, written about in your religious books. Most of the Earth was tropical jungle during the period from 200 million to 20 million years ago. You can see evidence of this by examining the geological formations, particularly in your desert areas. For example, the barren desert known as the Petrified Forest in northeastern Arizona was once dense jungle. Many areas, including your favorite hotspot, Sedona, was underwater for much of that time. In other words, your world was bathed in water and dense vegetation. In most areas, even the polar regions were teeming with life. The humanoid form was seeded on your planet approximately 100 million years ago, right in the middle of this jungle period. There were small groups of humanoids confined to relatively small areas of your world. These humanoids were 7th density beings with wings and highly developed telepathic and psychic abilities. They lived in paradise. They were loving and cooperative and communicated with the exotic plant and animal life that abounded everywhere. They extracted their food directly from sunlight and assimilated water through their pores. They had need of nothing but each other. This is a rough equivalent of what you call the Garden of Eden in your religious writings. The life forms during that time were varied and plentiful. About 60 million years ago, the dinosaurs were killed off when the comet Arunhatak made its 10,500 year cycle and came too close to Earth on this particular pass. The resulting cooldown destroyed a large part of the vegetation, but the Earth, in her amazing regenerative ways, was able to bounce back, and another fertile period ensued. There were only a few 100,000 humanoid forms on Earth at that time, and most of them retreated underground, and, with the help of various Pleiadian factions, created a subterranean world of great beauty and intricacy. This is where the legends of an inner Earth came from. We will talk about that at a later time. Most of the life forms of Pan were exotic and do not exist today. These are legends of a few of them, including the Pegasus and Centaur, no relation to Alpha Centaurians, and some of the creatures were descendants of the dinosaurs and early reptiles. The dragons got their folklore from two sources, Pangaea and the Draconian invasion. The early dragons were reptilian creatures that evolved along with the dinosaurs and were genetically manipulated by us and other ET groups. Later, the Draconians came to Earth with their own reptilian form and began interbreeding and creating exotic dragon forms. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. The fall of Pangaea was the original fall from grace as chronicled in your writings. This occurred when the sons of God, the 7th density Pleiadians, incarnated into the human forms evolving on Earth and forgot their divine connection. The humanoid forms, before the incarnation of the 7th density Pleiadians, had a rudimentary consciousness somewhere between 2nd and 3rd density. Your evolutionary scientists see the change brought about by the Pleiadian incarnations as an unexplained mutation that marks the difference between apes and humans. The incarnated Pleiadian humans interbred with the various creatures, hence the half-horse, half-man, and many others. The fairy kingdom was one of the offshoots of this interbreeding. 7th density souls took on a human form that had wings. When they interbred with the 4-legged creatures, one of the results was the Pegasus, or winged horse. As the humanoid Pleiadian souls dropped in vibration, their wings became atrophied, along with their telepathic and other abilities. They became more and more like the creatures evolving on Earth, more animalistic in nature, and less able to formulate higher intellectual reasoning abilities. All this continued until approximately 10 million years ago, when the end of the cosmic cycle occurred and the electromagnetic polarities shifted. At that time, great storms raged across the Earth. As a result of the changing EM frequencies, a flood wiped out most of the creatures residing on Earth. This is referred to in your religious writings as the Great Flood. At that time, most of the Earth became covered in water, with a few remnants of land and life remaining here and there. The channel wanted to make sure we let everybody know that all our messages will be contained in a book at some point. What is your Earth expression? Don't hold your breath waiting. Okay, we are trying to have a sense of humour here. Apparently writing a book takes a fair amount of concentration and such. The actual receiving of the information is quite straightforward, but it is the preparation, editing and production of the book that requires the energetic output. At any rate, today we examine the major wars and infusions of souls onto your world that mark the beginning of what you call violence and conflict. For many of you, this will not be a pretty picture, but I suspect many of you are mature souls now and can handle a little unpleasantry amidst all the glorious creation. Your Earth was not the only planet in your system that received ET attention. 10 million years ago, there were 3 planets that harboured life forms: Earth, Mars and Maldek. These were the 3rd, 4th and 5th planets from your Sun at the time. Yes, the environment on the 4th and 5th planets was colder and less hospitable than on Earth, but that did not stop the ETs from colonising these worlds. Those that came to Mars and Maldek were adventurous sorts, willing to endure the harsh winters and barren landscapes that dotted these planets. Although there were forests and plant life in the equatorial regions, and plenty of water and ice in the polar regions. Many of those souls that perished during the Great Flood of Earth reincarnated on Mars and Maldek. The civilizations already developing on those worlds were from many different star systems, and now the Pleiadian root race joined the mix. As you can imagine, the beings now residing on those worlds had dropped in vibration to the 4th density. Souls born into a 4th density world did not receive the same kind of loving attention that souls in 7th density experience. These outer planets were therefore a repository for a bizarre array of thought forms and thought creations, thereby resulting in a rich and varied astral realm, the realm of thought creation, imagination, and the dream state. Throughout this period, many beings from across the galaxy had taken notice of the Earth experiment and its neighbouring planets. A group of souls from the Draco star system sent scout craft to Earth about 40 million years ago, and again roughly 1 or 2 million years before the Great Flood, about 12 million years ago. Although they did not settle en masse, their reports back to the Draconian councils put Earth, Mars and Maldek on the map for exploration and possible conquest. Another group from the constellation of Orion also took notice of the fledgling Earth souls and their compatriots on Mars and Maldek. We of the 7th and 12th densities were still monitoring the Earth experiment closely, and these less than savoury civilizations from Orion and Draco were not able to gain a foothold on Earth due to our careful observation. It would have been like marching into a laboratory and announcing they were taking over the experiment. We had a protective vibration around Earth, and things like this didn't happen. At least, not at that time. However, the same protections were not afforded Mars and Maldek because, quite frankly, that was not our terrain. These planets were more of a free-for-all, and so come they did, in small numbers at first, as scouts and small settlements amidst the existing communities. Once interbreeding began to occur, the souls from Orion and Draco began incarnating as well. The Draco reptilian form found it hard to adapt to the Mars and Maldek environments, and reincarnation became the preferred method of infusing oneself into these worlds. Both the Orion and Draco systems had a wide variety of conscious beings, and the explorers who settled on Mars and Maldek were quite aggressive and warrior-like in their mentality. Their main purpose in coming to Earth's solar system was conquest and mining of natural resources, basically anything that would give them power and prestige. These souls had long ago forgotten their connection to Source and felt they needed to take from others in order to feel whole and complete. It was not long before war started to break out on Mars and Maldek. Due to Mars's proximity to Earth and the watchful gaze of our members, the Orions and Draconians were less willing to reincarnate in mass numbers on Mars. They preferred the relative distance of Maldek. They began coming in record numbers, and pretty soon the Maldekian civilization numbered in millions of souls. They built great cities out of stone, and in matching their consciousness, these cities had great fortresses and towers to afford protection from attack. At some point, the Maldekian peoples discovered neutron technology and began manufacturing bombs and wartime implements. At that time, several million years ago, there were no safeguards in place to prevent the runaway consequences of this technology. Although the Maldekian civilization began over 10 million years ago in Earth time, it continued to evolve into a series of warring factions. This warring attracted the attention of both benevolent and malevolent ET groups from various systems around the galaxy, but because of the non-interference agreement and protection of free will, little was done to intervene. About 3,200,000 years ago, and the neutron weapons were deployed. It was supposed to be a limited nuclear exchange between two of the warring factions. At this point, the DNA of the souls were a mixture of Draconian and Orion strands, both of which contained the aggressive genes. Each side in this conflict, although both sides had similar DNA, wanted to outdo the other, and the weapons grew increasingly larger and more numerous. The first exchange only destroyed a few thousand humanoids. The side most damaged would rebuild and retaliate, each time with greater devastation. Although it seemed to be discovered by accident, a particularly powerful neutron bomb was developed using a rare combination of elemental catalysts. The scientists involved in its development did not realize the extent of its destructive capabilities. This weapon was fired at a military base hidden underground in enemy territory. Within this base were hundreds of neutron weapons. The enemy, realizing the bomb was coming, attempted to get their base weapons airborne. Several dozen of the several hundred weapons were launched and exploded in the sky, creating a brilliant flash. However, they were unable to intercept the oncoming, more powerful weapon, and it entered the silos of the enemy and simultaneously ignited over 200 weapons buried in the ground. The combination of the explosion of the more powerful weapon and the 200 conventional nuclear weapons resulted in a powerful earthquake that tore apart the planet of Maldek and eventually broke it into hundreds of fragments, which became the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter. Over 10 million souls perished in the blast, and these souls later reincarnated on Mars. We and the other benevolent groups were horrified at what happened and petitioned the Godhead for a greater level of intervention to prevent this from ever happening again. The resulting blast altered the orbits of Mars and Earth and severely disrupted the etheric bases on Jupiter and Saturn. A wave of electromagnetic disruption went out from the solar system, and beings from all over the galaxy took notice. A council was convened in the Alcyon system, home of the Great White Brotherhood, and it was established that no more complete planetary destruction would be allowed anywhere in the galaxy. This is the end of part 2. We are the founders.